Hi everybody, my name is Jemma Stone and welcome to my channel. If you like politics, US history, and makeup, I highly recommend you hit the subscribe button below because every single week I'm going to be coming to you with a new history lesson around our great sacred democracy. Oh, and did I forget to mention, you can watch me go from this to this. Ooh. That's right, every single week I'll be bringing you a fabulous drag transformation and you can expand your cranium at the same time. So for now, put on your thinking caps, grab your makeup brushes, and let's get to learning. Alright, so I'm back. I have done a little bit of prepping. I've glued my sideburns down because I need a haircut, glued my brows down, and I have shaved my face. Before we get started, I do want to give a couple disclaimers. First one is that I do not work in government or politics. I don't have a history or civics degree. I just find the way our country functions is super fascinating, and I hope you will too. Second disclaimer, I am not a professional makeup artist. I am a self-taught drag queen, and if you don't like any of the techniques I'm using today, then That being said, this video is not about the makeup today. We are going to be learning, and you're going to get to watch me do my makeup in the process. It gives me something to do. If you are interested in seeing the products that I'm using today, I will post those in the description box below, but we're going to jump right in. Now, when I was first thinking and researching on the topic for today's video, I was thinking about, what's relevant, what's currently happening in our world right now. We're going to jump in real hot and heavy today. Now, most countries around the world elect their heads of state by means of direct election, aka a popular vote, aka whoever wins the most votes wins. The United States, on the other hand, she's like, oh my dear, we are the only country, the only democratic country in the world to use a confusing little system called the Electoral College. Now, it's made up of delegates from each U.S. state, and when people are voting in the presidential election, they're actually voting for who their state's going to vote for. Huh? Now, the Electoral College was established by Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and it was amended by the 12th and 23rd Amendments. I should probably mention that the Electoral College is not a physical place, so for those of you that are just getting into politics and history, it's not a physical place. Now, I know there's some people out there that probably think it is a physical place just because it sounds like it's a place, but let's put it this way. The Electoral College is about as tangible as Trump University. Now, the Electoral College consists of 538 members, one for each U.S. Senator and Representative, and 3 additional representatives from the District of Columbia. Now, each state has a number of electoral votes equal to the combined number of their congressional delegation. I'm in Wisconsin, so we have 2 senators automatically here, and we have 8 representatives. Now, 2 plus 8 equals 10, so Wisconsin is worth 10 electoral votes. You might be asking yourself how we come up with these numbers. Well, for that, we can look to the U.S. Constitution, where it lays out that each state will get 2 senators. But the House of Representatives is where it gets a little ickier. Now, delegates to the House of Representatives is determined by each state's population size, and the Constitution caps the number of congressional districts, or representatives to the House, at 435. But wait, does that mean that a person's vote in one state counts more than it would in another state? Well, technically yes, and this is where the numbers get a little trickier, so follow along, rewind if you need to. Per the Constitution, each state will have at least 3 electoral votes. That's 2 per senator for each state, and at least 1 congressional district, no matter the state's population size. For instance, a state like Wyoming that has right under 579,000 people living there automatically gets 2 senators. Now, they also only have 1 congressional district, so they have 2 senators plus 1 House of Representative member. That equals 3 electoral votes. California, on the other hand, has roughly 40 million people living there, and they have 2 senators automatically per the Constitution, and as of recently, they have 53 congressional districts, so 53 plus 2 equals 55, making California's electoral vote count at 55. From Wyoming, each electoral vote represents roughly 193,000 people. In California, on the other hand, 1 electoral vote represents roughly 727,000 people. Crazy, right? I know. It's like the numbers just they don't make a whole lot of sense to me, I guess. Now, some argue that the Electoral College was put into place so one political party doesn't overtake the other political party, and others argue that vast amounts of citizens are underrepresented. I see the argument to both sides. I get it. Now, often this doesn't make much of a difference because there's so many states out there that are such strongholds for certain political parties that they're never going to be in jeopardy of flipping. But what makes all the difference is what we like to call a swing state. Swing states can quite literally change the direction of a presidential election. That's why every election cycle you're going to see presidential candidates spending a lot of time in said states. Let's look at it from another angle, or what I like to call the real culprit of the Electoral College: statewide winner-takes-all laws. Today, there's 48 states across the country who have laws dictating that the entire count of their electoral vote will go to the person who won the state's overall popular vote total. And this is the reason why a lot of people have called for the end of the Electoral College, because it effectively disenfranchises all the people who didn't vote for the person who won the popular vote, even if the election's like itty-bitty close. There are, in fact, 2 states in the country who use a completely different system of determining who gets their electoral votes, and they're very, very different places. Enter Maine and Nebraska. Both of these states use a little system called the district system. And what happens is the district system allows it so the electoral votes could be split. Instead of giving the electoral votes to the person who won the overall state count, one electoral vote is given to the individual who wins the popular vote in that particular congressional district, and the other 2 electoral votes are given to the candidate who wins the overall popular vote in the state. Now, this system could potentially split the electoral vote, and it happened in 2008 with Barack Obama and John McCain. Barack Obama won the district in Nebraska that included Omaha, and John McCain won the state's 2 other congressional districts and the overall statewide total as well. So when Nebraska presidential electors went to cast their votes that December, there were 4 Republican electors and there was 1 Democrat elector. Now, this was the first time that Nebraska's electoral vote was split. Fun fact, if you were watching the most recent general election, you would see that this happened again. In fact, it not only happened in Nebraska, it also happened in Maine. Joe Biden won 1 congressional district in Nebraska and Donald Trump won 4, while in Maine, Joe Biden won 3 electoral votes and Donald Trump won 1. Now, are you still hanging in there with me? Because I know it's a lot of numbers and it's about to get a whole lot heavier, but believe me, learning how to talk about this is a lot harder than listening to it. Now, how do the states nominate electors, you ask? Well, we're gonna find out. The Constitution does not specify how each state should elect its electors, but it actually allows the states to do that themselves. Now, the 2 most common methods of selecting state electors are nomination by state party convention and by state party committee. Typically, parties select members who are known for their loyalty to the party, or local elected officials, or state party activists. And in some states, you might even see the electors' names on the ballots along with the presidential candidates. Most states don't do this, so I don't think I've ever seen this on a ballot in my life. So if you have, leave it in the comment section below and let me know where you live. Now, once a candidate has effectively won the state's nomination, the official nominated state electors have effectively won their state's official slate of electors. If that makes sense. Now, how on earth did we come up with this crazy contraption? Well, hang on to your seats because I'm about to learn you some very valuable information. Enter the 12th Amendment, where the Constitution allowed each political party to nominate 1 person for president and 1 person for vice president each. Now, the framers of the Constitution never intended or never anticipated to see the rise of a national 2-party presidential election system, but here comes the 12th Amendment, and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna have a really complex, just over-the-top election system." And then the 12th Amendment's like, oh yeah, we're also going to have 2 competing party systems. So that way it gets super partisan and super biased, right? So largely today, this is the same system that remains in place. A little backstory for you. Some people claim that the framers of the Constitution elected the Electoral College process rather than a direct election method in order to, and I quote, balance interests of high population and low population states. But, and it's a big but, Our deepest political divisions have not always been between high population and low population states, but rather between north and southern states and coastal and interior states. Like, have you ever looked at a color-coded electoral map at the end of election night? You're going to see a lot of blue around the coastlines and like in the northern part of the country and kind of like in the middle northern part of the country. And then you're going to see a lot of red in the southern parts and in most of the interior. Now, another founding era argument for the college stemmed from the idea that citizens across a vast country would not be able to choose intelligently and wisely among the slate of presidential candidates because they didn't really have a means of communicating back then, aside from mail and like newspapers, and there wasn't a whole lot of, obviously there wasn't any social media, so you couldn't get on Facebook and be like, oh my god, what did this guy say today? But can you imagine, though, a presidential candidate or just like someone in political power saying, oh my god, just a regular citizen isn't smart enough to figure out who they should vote for? Now, the Electoral College originated out of these ideas, but what basic standard civics classes fail to often mention is the real demon hiding behind the Electoral College: slavery. Stop it. That's right. Imagine it. Philadelphia, the 19th century. The Pennsylvanian James Monroe, he recommended that we use a direct national election system to nominate the President of the United States. And then there's our boy, the slave-owning Virginian James Madison. So old Jimmy boy is out there, and he's just ranting and raving about how slaves should be able to count for population numbers, but they also shouldn't be able to vote. So, yeah, there's that. So James Madison was someone who supported the idea of the Electoral College because it balanced the fairness levels between the North and the South. So this is a direct quote from James Madison. He said, "The right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the northern than in the southern states, and the latter could have no influence in the election on the score of Negroes." Now, in other words, what James Madison was saying was that in a direct election, the northern states would win over the southern states because the over 500,000 enslaved people in the United States lived in those southern states and, of course, could not vote. But the Electoral College, which was a prototype in the same speech by Madison, allowed for the counting of states for population numbers, but only at a 2/5 margin. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but the U.S. Census has a direct impact on our electoral numbers, which is why it was so important for James Madison to make sure that slaves were counted in the population. Now, it allowed the southern states' population numbers to grow substantially, but again, they only counted slaves partially. This was also known as the 3/5 compromise. Now, the populations at this time were pretty much equal between the North and the South. However, about a third of the population in the South were non-voting slaves. About 93% of the country's enslaved people lived in just 5 of those southern states, which ultimately made the real benefactor in this whole situation with the Electoral College those southern states. Now, with a 3/5 compromise, the South's congressional numbers grew by 42%. So basically, the Electoral College is another byproduct of systemic racism that still plagues us largely today. Now, we've seen great strides in advancement of human rights, like the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 15th Amendment, which granted or which prohibited states from denying a male citizen the right to vote based on his color, race, or previous servitude. Also, the 19th Amendment, which allowed women the right to vote. Well, not all women, just white women. Let's not forget that. And then, of course, there's the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which allowed women of color the right to exercise their voice and be able to vote. Now, we could get into the history of voter suppression, which still largely exists today, but I think I'll save that for another video because it's quite the meaty conversation. Now, needless to say, the Electoral College is a very confusing system, but if you're still hanging in there with me, I got some other stuff to talk about. Now, every election cycle, there seems to be a group of people who are typically on the losing side of the Electoral College who call for the the nominated electors to go against who their party voted for in their state's popular election. Now, we like to call this faithless electors. Now, we heard it from Democrats in 2016, and we're hearing it from Republicans now, that they want the electoral nominees to go against their party. But let's remember, it is their party who nominated them to the Electoral College based off, listen for it,
political loyalty.
That's right. So, when you have a bunch of, other party people that are like, oh, you should not vote for who your state's party voted for, they're like, screw that. Why would I do that? That's who I voted for too. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't really happen. Historically, I think it's 2% of the time that this has actually happened. So it's nothing really to pay a lot of attention to, but there have been times that we've had faithless electors in our system. Now, interesting fact, there's currently no federal law or system that requires the nominated electors to vote for the party who nominated them to the Electoral College. In fact, in 2016, there were 7 faithless electors. 3 electoral members from the state of Washington cast their vote for Colin Powell instead of Democrat Hillary Clinton. Then another Democratic senator from the state of Washington cast his vote for Faith Spotted Eagle, who was a member of the, let me see if I pronounce this right, the Yankton Sioux Nation. I really apologize if I butchered that. Now, there was also a Democratic senator from the state of Hawaii who voted for Bernie Sanders instead of Hillary Clinton. Now, there was also a Republican from Texas who cast his electoral vote for John Kasich of Ohio instead of Donald Trump. And there was also a Republican from the state of Texas who voted for Libertarian Ron Paul. Now, there's been several states that have passed laws that require electors to vote in lines with their party, or they can be fined or possibly even replaced. Now, most of these states that have these laws require candidates to sign a pledge before they go and vote for the slated presidential candidates. So some states like North Carolina impose a $500 penalty, and they are also considered replaced if they choose to go against who their state nominated for president. Other states, like Oklahoma for instance, only charge a $1,000 fine. So if you want to be an asshole in Oklahoma, it only costs you $1,000. Oh, gross. This makeup is just not staying on today. Now, all these numbers, and unfortunately, friends, I have a few more for you. Most importantly, probably the most important number that we'll be discussing, probably the most important number in all of American history. And that number, my friends, is 270. 270 is the crucial number of electoral votes that a presidential candidate must receive in order to win the presidency. Now, it is possible for each presidential candidate to get 269 electoral votes apiece. However, it's very unlikely to happen. In the event that a tiebreaker or a tie would happen, and the tiebreaker would go to the House of Representatives. Now, each state delegation gets 1 vote to decide who wins out of that tiebreaker. Now, I could go on for days about what would happen in the event of a tie, because it's a lot of different moving pieces, but I'm nearly out of makeup, and I feel very pretty. I just need some lips and my outfit, and I'm done. Let's put on my lips, and I'll tell you a little bit about the timeline of things to expect, because it's super duper exciting, because we just had a presidential election. Wapa! She's done. Feel very patriotic, to be honest. There's some things that are going to be happening. Some things have already happened prior to you watching this video. Some things are going to happen after you watch this video, and it's important that we all be aware of how things are going to work from here on out. So on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, the states select their presidential electors, aka the general election. So that's already happened, right? Something to make note of. Historically, news networks have been able to call a winner on election night. This is based on available results and from data like exit polls. There's also no federal law that requires states to have their elections certified on election night. In fact, it's technically, statistically impossible to be able to do that. In fact, each state has their own set of laws determining the amount of time they each have to canvass and certify their elections. So when canvasses are complete, the local election officials certify the county results, and then those county results go on to the governor, and the governor certifies the statewide election results. Then the governor transmits a copy of the results and a list of the electors' names to the National Archives. Then, 6 days before the electors meet, there's a nice little deadline called the Safe Harbor deadline where states try to have their results certified by. Now, they aren't legally required to meet this deadline, but if they do meet it, it prevents Congress from possibly needing to get involved. Then, 6 days after the Safe Harbor deadline, the electors in each state and the District of Columbia meet to formally cast their vote for President of the United States. Then they send certificates of their vote to each state's chief election official, which is usually the Secretary of State, the National Archives, and the current sitting President of the U.S. Senate, aka Mike Pence. We then come to January 6th at 1 o'clock p.m. The Vice President has a little read-aloud moment where they go over the list of certified election results from each state elector in alphabetical order. As long as no member of Congress objects in writing, the sitting Vice President certifies the election results of the President-elect and the Vice President-elect. We come to January 20th at noon, where the President and Vice President are inaugurated and formally sworn into office. Well, that's it. Well, the basics of the Electoral College. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that way you know when I upload new content. Again, I'm here for you every single week. If you have specific context you want me to start doing research on and you want to learn a little bit more, hit me up in the comment section below. You can also find me on all social media platforms at The Jemma Stone. I'm also on Venmo if you want to send me a little money. Ooh, The Jemma Stone. Make sure you join me next week where I'll be discussing another topic on our great, wonderful, sacred democracy. Ooh. 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 Not wearing nails. Ooh. Yeah. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, be nice to someone today. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!